Hello, Ambah here, and welcome to episode 13 of the Design Tales, the first for 2026, and approximately the 1-year anniversary of my first Design Tales episode around a year ago. Welcome if you haven't joined me before, and welcome back everyone who has. I'm a knitwear designer. I design knitting patterns for knitters, and these episodes usually focus on a newly released, published design. And I'll share information about that, the design process, knitting tips, how it's made, construction and styling tips, anything that seems relevant to the particular design I'm talking about. I've released 12 episodes already, and some of those I discuss multiple designs. Sometimes I'll share the history of a design, taking it back to earlier designs that inspired it or that it's evolved from, or it's a part of an overall growing collection perhaps. And today's episode is a little bit of that actually. The designs, I'll be sharing 5 designs today, which is quite a lot, and 4 of those are part of a knit along which will be happening in February, which is the Calentine's Be My Calentine. And the 4 patterns designed for that have been offshoots of earlier designs. So I'll get into that in a little bit. First, I wanted to talk about a design I have already published, or I could say republished this year, the start of the year. My first publication was this, which is the sweet little Scarfette. And it's not new because I actually first published this in 2016. So it's quite an older design. It's been a free pattern up until now, and you might even have a copy of the earlier version. It's something that was freely available on Ravelry, and I had it on a few other places as well, including my website. It's hard to see, but it's actually knit in the round. I'm just trying to... And it begins as a tube, starting at the point at one end, increasing, working in the round on circular needles or double pointed needles, and then to the other end, the other tip where it's decreased and bound off. And it's a cute little, wrap it round a couple of times or once for a little jaunty, maybe a double knot for a little jaunty neck scarf. Be worn a few ways. Over the years, I have had occasionally the question about how to get started on this project, knitting in the round with a small circumference starting point. And I have been meaning to make a video tutorial for that for some time. And finally, I had a chance to do that. So I decided to knit a fresh sample. And unfortunately, I do keep most of my samples, especially those that I'm quite fond of, which I am with this, but I couldn't find my original samples. I'm sure I must still have them somewhere. I just didn't dig deep enough in my boxes of samples, I guess. Anyway, it was nice to knit up a fresh version in this fabulous rusty colour. It's a single ply fingering weight yarn, and the pattern is designed for fingering weight, or you could use, as I did in the yellow original sample, 2 strands of mohair, I guess lace weight, held together to the same gauge. And that was just such a beautiful, I will need to go and find that, such a beautiful, lovely, soft scarf. So I published this at the start of January, or republished it. I also took the opportunity to expand the pattern a little, just give it a little bit more detail and the accompanying tutorial video to go with it, and decided to start charging for the pattern. It's available on Ravelry and in my Etsy stores, and also if you have the original version, you can still use that. Obviously that will work, and you'll be able to find the tutorial. It's in my YouTube channel and also on my website. I'll put a link below so you can find that. Which brings me to the Calentine's patterns, which are another 4 scarves. So briefly, the overview of the Calentine is that over the years, often I have a February cal, and I usually call it Knit Love, the Knit Love cal. And since 2013, I published a heart lace pattern, and I go into a lot more detail about the design process for that in the video where I talk about this cardigan pattern last year. So this is a Sweetheart cardigan, which has a little heart lace feature. And there's also the Sweet Over, which is a pullover version of this cardigan. And I'll link all these below. There's an episode of the Design Files last year where I talk about this, and I also talk about the whole process leading up to how I created the heart lace and other designs that I've used it for. Each year I often add a new design to the Knit Love collection, I call it. And now it includes the garments. There's another kind of shrug cardigan. There's hat, cows, shawls, wraps, quite a few. And then in other designs I have incorporated the lace with a mosaic element or other pattern elements. So there's quite a few examples where I have used the heart lace, and each year have had, not each year, but many years I've had the Knit Love knit along, and that's great. And late last year I was starting to think about that, and it occurred to me to do something a little bit different. And I was thinking, what could I do? Maybe I need to just have a different tangent completely for a Valentine's knit along, or not have one. Anyway, the idea popped into my mind I started thinking about the necklaces, and I don't really know what they're called, but the necklaces that you break in half and you give half to your loved one, whether it be a sister, a Calentine, a Palentine, or your Valentine, or best friend. I think they were even called best friend necklaces and sweetheart necklaces. I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, they came to mind, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun to have a cal kind of inspired by that idea? And I started thinking about a swap, some kind of project swap. So cal partners located in the same area or a distance apart, probably in the same country because it involves postage, each knitting a project for the other. Actually, I initially thought, oh, wouldn't it be good if you knit two versions of, and I decided at that point, little cute skinny scarves would probably be a good project. And so I started with the idea of one skinny scarf idea that could be knit twice by a knitter, with one being sent to the other knitter and the other knitter sending one of their two projects in return. And thought, oh, it'd be cute to wear the two scarves together or separately. And yeah, so I started to think about that as a concept for a Valentine's Calentines. So yeah, that was kind of the idea behind the Calentine. And I've given it lots of thought, and I've actually come up with 4 different designs in the end. I just kept thinking, oh, but that could be a scarf, and that, and that. So they kept flowing. In December last year, I just kept knitting more and more scarf designs, as I said at the start of this episode, largely based on other designs, including, of course, this little love heart scarf. So the cal, in that, I decided to give it lots of options as well, that you don't have to knit 2 versions of the same thing and send one to another person. So the cal is pretty open in that you could knit one scarf for yourself and participate in the cal, and that's it. Essentially knitting one of the patterns of the 4 pattern collection is participating in the cal. There's an option to have a swap, whether that be with someone that you know, someone in your knit group, or you just knit it for a gift for someone without them knitting you one in return. And that might be more of a local swap or with someone that you engage with or connect with already, so you might still post it to them. And then another element of the KAL, which is in the Ravelry group, my Ravelry group, and I'll link everything below, you'll be able to find all the links, is that there's a thread where people can find their Calentine. So you can post in there and say, ideally, where you're located, like not exactly, but which country you're located in, because I think same country postage makes the most sense. And then, you know, a little bit about your colour, likes and dislikes, and through that thread, able to find your match and connect. So there's a few ways to participate in the knit along, and you can also join in on social media with the hashtag #BeMineCalentine, and I'll post that below too. So yeah, I think it's pretty cute, and because they're little scarves, they're knitting up pretty quickly. They're currently in test knitting at the moment. There's 4 test knit groups knitting the 4 different scarves, and they're looking so cute, and just, yeah, it's quite moreish actually, as I found. As I said, I started off with 1 design for the KAL and have forced myself to stop at 4 because I have other projects that I need to work on as well. So yeah, it's not a huge amount of yarn for each project, and it's just a fun little way to join in to a knit along and hang out with some lovely people. The knit along begins February 6th, that's a cast on date, and I will be publishing all the patterns on that date in Australian time, so it's a little bit earlier for some of you in the Northern Hemisphere. And they'll be available. Currently, there is project planning information. I have put that on my Ravelry pattern pages and made a bundle of those patterns, which I'll link to down below. So if you're curious about the yardage required, the yarn weight, anything that you might be wanting to know about the patterns, then you can check that out in advance. Otherwise, the best way to hear about the publication, because they're not published yet, is to check out my Ravelry and or Etsy store in a week on February the 6th. If you're watching after this, I'll already be published, and you can click on the link below. And yeah, the patterns will be there. The 4 patterns each feature a different technique. There is a very simple intarsia pattern, a mosaic knitting pattern, a bobble pattern, and the last one, lace, this heart lace. So the 4 different patterns feature different stitches. They're little projects. It's a fun way to dip your toes into something new, a new to you technique. All right, I'll get started with each of them since I've got a few to get through. The first one is the Snaggletooth scarf. Last year I published the Snaggletooth shawl and also the Snaggletooth should, which is a shawl hood or scarf hood. And both of those have their own design tales videos, so you can go and revisit those if you want to hear more about those projects. Essentially, it's intarsia. It's quite a good first intarsia pattern because you're only ever using 2 colours at a time. You start at the tip, and there's a video tutorial as well that goes with the pattern to really help you get started. You start at the tip and work up to the other end, so they're quite short little rows, and you can make the scarf as long or short as you'd like it to be. You can add a little pop of colour like I've done here, or not, or add lots of different pops of colour and use up all those little tiny bits of yarn. And this is knit in DK weight yarn. It's a great little stash buster, as are these all. And that's the Snaggletooth scarf. They all work really well as headbands as well. And I kind of think this would be a really cute belt, this project. Definitely can see it working in that way. I also knit, this is my first sample, so it's just a more neutral colour version of it. So that's a Snaggletooth scarf in the Intarsia technique. And this was certainly inspired by the broken necklace idea that kind of started me off thinking about this knit along in the first place, that ending up with two of these could be a cute, you know, little double. If you had one from each knitter, layer them up. Then pattern number 2 is the Moonflowers scarf. And Moonflowers is a mosaic knitting design. This pattern is written for DK weight yarn. I used a black solid DK, and I had a lot of fingering weight yarn left over from an Advent project. So I held them double for the DK weight equivalent and made this beautiful fade from all the beautiful leftovers of that set, which is highly satisfying. And mosaic, if you haven't worked with mosaic before, it's fantastic for colour work. It looks so impressive, but you're only working one colour per row. It's essentially like stripes. So you're working one colour on the right and then the wrong side row and then change colour and so forth. And then the way the pattern works is that stitches are slipped. So in a row you might knit 2, slip 1, and then that slip stitch is a colour from the previous row that then shows up in the work. This is started also tip to tip. Start at the very tip, increase, and then you can work as many of these little flower motifs as you like to the length that you like. I kind of went with this sort of length for each one that allowed you to wrap it twice around if you wanted to, or that you could wrap it once and let it dangle, or tie it. I think you could even tie it a bit like a tie. There's a few wearing options there, and again, headscarf. I have got the genesis of this flower design began years ago with a Halloween Cal design, which is a betwixt shawl. So I talk a lot more about the Moonflowers motif and design process in one of the Halloween videos from last year. I did, I think, 3 videos in the end. So I'll link that below, which episode that actually was, if you're interested in learning more about that design process. And I have another one here. This is a fingering weight version, which is not written in the pattern, but you could easily knit the pattern in fingering weight yarn if you wanted to. This is an earlier prototype where I decided I'd do an Intarsia I-cord along the edges instead of the slipped stitch edging. And to be honest, I just found it quite chaotic and thought that this was an easier, more approachable method, especially with the Cal in mind, that I didn't want it to be too awkward. I mean, I think, as I just said, this is a simple Intarsia project, and it is, but I found with this, it just got really kind of just a bit more complicated. But it's certainly an easy adjustment that you could make, that you work the I-cord in the main colour and have a separate ball for each side and work Intarsia I-cord so that you have that Intarsia edging, which is pretty sweet. And the fingering weight, like, it's quite warm here, it's summer here in Australia, and I think I'd actually almost get away with this on a cooler summer day as just like a little knitted accessory. So that's the Moonflowers scarf. And then next up we have the heart one. I call this the Sweetheart scarf. So it's using this lace heart motif. It's knit from tip to the centre And then stitches are held while the other half is knit tip to centre, and that means that the hearts, hopefully you can see them, all end up facing the right way up. So the hearts are, if I just continued to knit it all the way around, then these hearts would be upside down, which is fine too, but this is what I decided to do for this. So once both halves are knit, it's grafted together in the centre there. This is a DK weight yarn version, and it's still a cute little lightweight scarf. And then I also have the fingering weight option in the pattern. The number of hearts varies between the two, and that's about it really. It's just a narrower finish, and obviously inspired by my Heart-igan, using some of the yarn I had left over for that. Same again, this is knit to the centre and then joined in the centre. And what's great about this lace is it does look great with any weight yarn, really. You could just use sport weight, you could use a heavier weight. I have made a super chunky, not scarf, but one of the shawl patterns in this heart lace I've made with a super bulky yarn, and it's really cool. It actually only has 3 hearts. They're really big, and the lace just shows up so beautifully in any yarn weight. You could even use a lace weight yarn, but you'd have a very skinny scarf, which, you know, for a headband, it's nice having a smaller scarf too. So that's number 3 design for the cow. We've got Snaggletooth, Moonflowers, Sweetheart, and then the last is this little cutie, the Sprinkles scarf. So this knits up really quickly. It's garter stitch. It is inspired by the Sprinkles shawl that I designed around about a year ago. And I do have a video of the Sprinkles shawl on the Design Tales series, so you can go and check that out if you're interested in seeing that. It's just a fun way to use some fun colours. It can be neutral as well. It doesn't have to be the neon pop, but adding that cute little bobble pop. It's garter stitch, knits up really quickly. It's very cute. Quite fond of this one, particularly because I'm just in such a murky green, neon green phase at the moment. So it's knit on the bias, the stitches are cast on here, and then there's some edge increasing to give that shaping. The bobbles are worked over a single row, and there's a tutorial to go with those. They're quite straightforward. And yeah, it's a real cutie. We did have a test to wonder if assigned pooling yarn would be a good yarn choice for this. And they gave it a go, and it didn't seem to work that well. They weren't happy with the result. So maybe, maybe not. I had a person in the pre-knit-along chat thread also ask about that, and yeah, I'm not sure. From the one person who tried it out, it didn't seem to be the most effective yarn choice. I think having a nice pop of colour, it doesn't use a lot of yarn for the pop, is a fun way to knit this pattern. And then perhaps the assigned pooling yarn for one of the specific assigned pooling patterns. I'm not really sure, I haven't knit with it myself. But it was a good idea and good to explore, I thought. So that's pattern number 4 for the Calentine, or Be Mine Calentine knit along. I hope you'll join us, whether it's knitting yourself something cute or beyond that, knitting all of the scarves, knitting something for a swap or for a loved one. However you participate, I'm excited to see what you create with these cute little designs and have a bit of lovely fun in the KAL. I've got a blog post up with all the details for the KAL and links to what's currently now the project planning pages, and then that will link through to the published pattern pages when they're published. And I mean, if you've got any questions, post them in the comments below or send me a message. Otherwise, come and hang out in the Ravelry group for some pre-KAL chat, or share on Instagram or wherever you hang out on social media. And that's it for this episode of the Design Tales. Fairly short and sweet. If there's anything you'd like to hear more from me this year, please post in the comments below if you've got any questions or suggestions. I'll continue to make episodes when I have a new pattern to share, and perhaps at times I'll also revisit older patterns. It's always my mission, it's an ongoing mission of mine to revamp some of my older patterns into my current style and template. And usually that doesn't necessarily mean big changes. It's just more the way I write patterns has kind of evolved over the years. And yeah, I like to just revisit the older patterns to bring them up to how I would currently write them. And it takes time. I tell you, I've been doing this for a few years, and every now and then there'll be a fresh one that comes out where I have revamped the pattern. And generally my subscribers, my newsletter subscribers, will hear about that. And I'll usually have a very special offer on those patterns, and probably would include it as a featured Friday pattern, which is something I've been doing perhaps for about the last 6 months. It started several years ago when I had Knit August, and in Knit August every day I would feature one of my patterns for a day with a 50% off discount, or just no code needed, automatic 50% off. And actually it would be over 48 hours because of the time zone. So yeah, so Knit August, I would call that. And that was a lot of fun. It was quite intense. And I'd been doing it for a few years. And then last year I decided to make it a weekly event instead. Yeah, so I have the featured Friday pattern, and there's an automatic 50% off the pattern that's featured for the week. And it's pretty random. For example, last week I saw auroras in my area. There was an amazing aurora. You may or may not have seen that yourself last week. I think it was pretty broad ranging, the amount of people that were able to see it. And so that inspired me to have my Aurora Hunters shawl as the featured Friday pattern for last week. So it is pretty spontaneous. I don't know. Yeah, it may relate to something that's kind of come up for me, something, or just completely unrelated, an older pattern that I think would be fun to share with the world again, or one that I've revamped and wanting to, give it some fresh love. So that's fun to look out for. I post about it on my Instagram account. My subscribers get that email every Friday, my newsletter subscribers. And yeah, I generally share it where I can, but they're the best places to find out about the featured Friday pattern. And speaking of Aurora, I took some photos, so I'll post a couple at the end of this video too, so that you can see last week's Aurora. I'm lucky enough to live not very far from the beach, so when the Aurora alerts come on, I can quickly walk down and take some photos. There's conditions, it needs to be clear, night, so it's not always optimum. Last week I went down, it was quite cloudy, but it was a really strong one. I was hopeful that it would clear, and amazingly the clouds did clear over time. And I got some photos and got to see with my bare eyes like the light pillars, not so much the colour, but the shimmering energy of the aurora, which is pretty exciting. So you also know where to point the camera to when you can see that. Other times it's quite random because you can't see it with the naked eye particularly. So that was a bit exciting, and that was why I chose the Aurora Hunter pattern last week for this featured pattern. And today's Thursday. I have a featured pattern to choose tomorrow. I have no idea what it will be, but I'll also be sharing the link to this video in my newsletter. Yeah, so subscribe to my newsletter if you want to be kept up to date with these things. Or you could subscribe to my channel here as well if you're interested in the design tales and the process behind the designs. I'm just trying to think what I'm publishing next. Yeah, a couple of things coming up that I won't talk about yet. I'll wait until the video is ready and chat about them then. So stay tuned for 2026 designs from my design studio. I look forward to sharing them with you and my next year design adventure. Thanks for joining in and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.